Hello, everyone, and welcome to Breathe Motivation. My name is Anthony Hester. I'm your host for this show. So glad to join you guys this week. I'm recording this episode on a Wednesday, so happy hump day. I hope you guys are enjoying your week. I know I've had a good week, an interesting week, which is always a great thing. My goal is to help you guys find purpose and passion in everything you do on a day-to-day basis, and that is why I'm here. So let's get started. So let me tell you a little bit about my week this week. It's been fun, you know. I got the great opportunity to do my civic duties and go to jury duty yesterday. It was a very interesting thing. You know, I don't know if any of you guys have gone to jury duty. I've jinxed myself, you know. I think you can start serving on jury duty at 18. I'm about to be 32. All up till, I think last year, I'd never gone to jury duty. And I was like, oh, I never go to jury duty, but I'd known tons of people that had always gone to jury duty. And I was like, man, I've never gone. I'm glad, it's good, right? Because you don't ever hear anything fun about jury duty. Every time I've talked to people about jury duty, they're just like, oh, man, I had to go to jury duty. I had to sit there for hours at a time. I've known people have gotten selected and they're like, well, I sat there for a week and listen to this case, and you can't talk about the case. I don't even know if I'm supposed to be talking about jury duty, so don't tell anybody, okay? But it was interesting to learn some lessons out of that, because I love people watching, and that's a fun thing to do. And at jury duty, there's so many different types of people, right? So I'm serving jury duty in Dallas, and you get in there, it's 8:00, right? And everybody's just kind of sitting in these chairs. There's hundreds of people there, and it's so fun to see because there's so many different people, right? So, just different types of backgrounds and everything. And as you get there, it's a lot of waiting. It's literally a lot of waiting. I was there from 8 a.m. in the morning, and I don't think I left until like 4 or 4:30, something like that. But this whole time, you're kind of just sitting there, and you kind of just sit next to people. People don't really talk unless you know people. And it's funny because, there's a lot of people that end up knowing each other. It's interesting. I didn't know anybody, but, I took my seat. I kind of took it where there was a lot of space. So there weren't a lot of seats in front of me. And, this lady next to me, she's so frustrated by being there. And this is what we're going to talk about today, is irritation and frustration. But she was so frustrated at being at jury duty. And I can get it. I get it, right? There's a lot of things going on, especially here in Dallas. Dallas was hit by tornadoes earlier, so there's a lot of people that are dealing with that. And I can definitely understand why you'd be frustrated or irritated by being at jury duty if you have those things going on. Or just, you're out of work, or, whatever way, right? It's just an inconvenience is what most people think of it as, right? And she was just like sitting there, and every time, like, there's people standing, and this lady had to keep saying, oh, hey, sit down. There's plenty of seats. You can't be standing because the fire marshal, we've got to be safe. So she probably said this maybe 100 times, right? And she was, it's kind of funny because she's like, hey, I can see those shadows on the wall. You guys need to come sit. So to me, it was a funny situation, and it was interesting to see how it works and the process works. But the whole time, this lady was huffing and puffing. Just, that lady would get on and, hey, you need to sit down. Man, why can't these people just sit down? How many times does she have to say it? And she was so irritated, so frustrated at being there. And again, I don't know what's going on in her life. And obviously I have to be there too. I've got a newborn son. I've got work. I've got all these things. But I was like, hey, I'm going to just enjoy the day, live in the now, live in the present, and see kind of what happens. It's an interesting spot to be in. So this whole time, the video comes on and talking about how, it's such an honor to do jury duty. And I think it is a great thing for, and I'm probably sounding like the video itself, but to serve democracy, you get to do jury duty, and you get to, really help out people. And, you're going to get a $6 check for helping out people. And this is just great for democracy. And I'm like, great. No, it is. It's a great thing to kind of serve and do that. But again, it's frustrating, right? For most people, it's irritating. But I thought it was really interesting. So I had that, and then today I had a conversation with somebody from work, and I'm in a meeting with somebody, and I get a call, and he's like, man, hey, I need help. I know you're in this, you're on the business side of our company, and I don't like to share a company, but you're on the business side of the company. This is so frustrating. This person's trying to get these lines added on, to this account, and it's so hard. Right? It's so hard. I don't know why, this is why we don't sell business. Right? And I hear this all the time. This is just in my role, right? It's so hard to sell business. It's so hard, and you guys make it so hard, so it's not easy for us to sell it. So what's the point of selling it, right? I hear it all the time. And that can get irritating and frustrating, but I'm past that point now, right? I've learned to just accept it as it is, listen to people's frustrations, find ways to help them see that it's not frustrating and help them through that process, right? That's my goal, is to help these people feel less frustrated. So I try to make it as simple as possible for these people and for the people that I help with. So he's so frustrated, so irritated, and you can tell from the minute you're talking to him. And he's just like, man, I don't know how you guys, I'm frustrated. I don't know how you guys aren't frustrated by the situation. I'm like, well, it is what it is. We'll work through it. So it's a process of trying to get these things added. And, he's going through it, can't figure it out. I was like, okay, we'll do these steps and, see if this works. And it doesn't work. So, he ends up calling me back and saying, hey, this isn't working. What's going on? Like, again, this is why it's so frustrating. So he's talking about how frustrated he is, right? And irritated he is. And I get it, right? So I'm like, okay, cool, not a big deal. Like, try this and go through these steps and go from there. So I get a third call, and he's like, hey, I'm going to give you this girl's number. Can you just help her out? Can you call her and walk her through this situation, through this? And I'm like, yeah, sure, no problem. I can do it. So as I call her, we go through this thing, we FaceTime. She's like, hey, let me show you this. So, maybe we can get through this a little bit quicker. And it's just like a misstep on something. But all this frustration from him, had created such a longer issue, right? Because he's frustrated by the situation. And it's not just him. This is multiple people, right? Life can be very frustrating and irritating if you don't know how to handle it. And I'm not saying I'm 100%, by no means am I perfect. I get frustrated and irritated all the time, and I have to kind of remind myself. But that's why I want to do this episode. We've got to be able to figure out how to kind of slow down that frustration and how we can work through that frustration, because a lot of great things can come out of working through frustration. Because a lot of the times, especially in life, there's so many things that, kind of build up. Frustrations and irritation are one of those things that just kind of build up. A lot of the times it's not something that, it can happen pretty quickly, go 0 to 100 real quick. But at the same time, irritation and frustration is a build-up process. So what I found is it's like almost like a wall, right? You start to get frustrated. And when you get frustrated, you start to think of, man, this sucks. I can't do this, right? And it's the first thing you think of is, I can't do this, or I can't figure this out. So instead of like looking for the solution or asking that question, you're just like, man, I can't figure this out. I'm stupid. I'm dumb. Why can't I figure this out? Right? The next thing would be to really kind of maybe ask somebody for help. Like this guy called and asked for help. Like, how can I help? How can I get help? And, you're frustrated and you're kind of passing on that frustration, but that's okay. Right? So at least you made a phone call or to figure it out, because a lot of people don't even get past that point. And that's the part that really eats at people: frustration and irritation. So when you look at people that are frustrated with their jobs, it's not just that they're frustrated at their job from day one. It's a buildup of things, right? Maybe you don't like the rules. Maybe you don't like your dress code. Maybe you don't like the money that's coming in. Maybe, your boss made you miss an important event because you couldn't take the day off, right? So there's all these irritations and frustrations that build up, right? Frustration is a wall that's built up over time that, at some point it gets so big to climb that you don't even want to look at it because it's so tall. How do I get over this wall? And that's where we have to kind of really immediately look at why I'm frustrated, right? Or start to see these little frustrations as they come and deal with them right then and there. Because frustration and irritation are build up things. So you've got to be able to, one, if you see yourself getting frustrated, right? So in this situation, I look at it and say, hey, I'm frustrated because I don't know, maybe I don't, the system isn't working like it should, right? So instead of blaming the system and getting frustrated at it, I got to say, hey, okay, great, this isn't working. What are some of the steps that I can take that maybe will be like a workaround, right? There's a workaround to everything. So what can I do to go through that process? How can I figure out what's going on and what really is happening, right? That's the first question you should ask. What do I know, and what solution do I have to be able to do this? What do I know, and how can I make this better, and how can I do the workaround, right? And this is where most people kind of, at this point, they just kind of throw in the towel. So you've got to be able to push through that initial frustration or irritation. And the reason why most people don't push through that frustration and irritation is because they're scared. You're scared of, one, the first thing, that pops in my head is, man, if I got to ask somebody, they're going to say, man, you're stupid, right? Or they're going to judge me because I don't know what the hell's going on. Or, man, I just, they're not going to know anything. If I don't know, then they don't know, right? So you get kind of hard-headed. And that's one of those things where, you've got to be able to take back and say, hey, what is the solution that I know? Can I fix this, or can I try something different, right? So you try something different and that doesn't work, right? So then you get a little bit more frustrated. So that at that point, you've got to be able to figure out and say, hey, who can I call? Who can I trust? Who do I trust that's not going to judge me? And this is kind of the thought process, right? Who can I trust that they're not going to judge me based on this little thing? Because I feel like this is an easy fix. So you start to call and you get that support from other people. Now, the thing is that support is a great thing. That's being able to find that support within your friends, your family, coworkers, however that works. It's a great thing. You've got to be able to have resources around you. And again, when it comes down to frustrations and working through that, you've got to be able to have those resources, because at the end of the day, those people that you trust, they're not going to judge you, right? They've all been there. We've all been there, right? We've all been frustrated by certain situations. And it's the people that don't work through those frustrations that create more and more trouble for themselves. And you've got to be able to dig into that. So when frustration comes, you've got to be able to peel those layers of frustration and say, why am I so irritated and why do I get so frustrated? Because as you start to go through that, it leads to a lot of different things. So, a lot of the times it'll lead to bad situations. It'll lead to bad relationships because you're so quick to snap at somebody because they did something that was irritating. But guess what? Hey, you maybe never told them that they do stuff that's irritating, right? So you've got to be able to be willing to have conversations, one with yourself, and say, hey, you know what? I might not know the solution, but I can find it. And if I do know the solution, maybe I try that. And if it doesn't work, guess what? I've got other people that can help me along that way. So there's ways to get around frustration and irritation, but you've got to be able to be aware of when you're getting frustrated and irritated. And then when it comes to different things like your job, your relationships, your, money, all these things, you got to be able to kind of just peel back all the layers. It's hard work. It is, right? But the quicker that you can catch that frustration and that irritation, the better you're going to feel, because you're not having to go down this long road of, man, I messed up here. And it's great to go through that, like you're finding yourself, right? And finding everything within yourself. But, it's so much better not to get that frustration or looking at that tall wall and saying, man, I can't climb over that wall because I'm so frustrated. Or, it's gotten to a point where it's almost unattainable, right? So in life, we can get frustrated, we can get irritated, but we've got to be aware of why those frustrations and irritations are coming. Be aware and being able to, kind of stop it in its tracks right away, because the more you go through it, the more frustrating it is, the more life can just throw you down and just drag you down, right? So you've got to be able to take one little step at a time with those frustrations and irritations, because at the end of the day, if you can focus on solutions versus your problems, you're going to live a better fulfilled life, a much happier life, because you're no longer irritated at those small things, right? Because a lot of times it's just, once you get so frustrated, you're always irritated at little tiny things. It can throw you down and you're so angry and you get blinded by the frustration. You can't even figure out how to get out of that situation. You start going through those ruts, right? We talk about ruts all the time, or going through autopilot because, I just don't want to deal with it. But just know, if you can get your way through that frustration, that irritation, there's great things that come out of it. And you can find better answers, better solutions. But you've got to be able to look at yourself and say, hey, I can find solutions, versus focusing on the problem. Because as we start to focus on that problem, that frustration becomes bigger and bigger and bigger, and that wall gets bigger, and we don't want to conquer it. And then at that point, we're throwing in the towel and saying, hey, you know what? I'm just going to give up. But at the end of the day, that frustration and irritation, if we can work through that, guess what? You just get stronger and stronger. And then at that point, you don't have to worry about jumping across this high wall, because you're focusing on it every day. You're focusing on not being frustrated. And it's okay to get frustrated. I'm not saying that, like I said, I'm not perfect. There are times where I get frustrated and irritated, but I have to remind myself, hey, I can get through this. I've gotten through it before. Or just kind of look at every circumstance that I've gone through. So that's what we've got to figure out and do. But stop being frustrated. If you start getting frustrated, start just looking for solutions versus, focusing on that problem, because that problem is just going to get bigger or just stay there, and that wall is just going to build up. So you don't want to get to that point. But follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Breathe Motivate. Like my page on Facebook, Breathe Motivation. Check out the website, breathemotivation.com. On this podcast serving thing, this podcast server, there's actually an opportunity for a live show that they just launched. I'm thinking about doing a live show soon. Yeah, you guys can actually call in on this app. It's called the Podbean app. That's who I use for my server for this podcast. I'd love to do a live show where you guys can ask questions or we can just have a conversation. I think I can have up to 200 people on this. We have like 400 and something followers just on Podbean. And if you're not on Podbean, you can download that app and jump on this thing, which is really cool. So I want to take that opportunity to do that very soon in the near future. I'll share that on my social media of when we're going to do that, but I think that'd be a great opportunity, or maybe I'll just record a show live so you guys can see how it works. But thank you guys so much for tuning in, and remember to breathe motivation and exhale success, and I will see you soon. Thanks.